In the previous section, we examined Arizona's seller disclosure obligations and how the principles of transparency and honesty protect the integrity of real estate transactions. Building on those same principles, this section focuses on another critical foundation of contract law, the duty of good faith and fair dealing. This doctrine, recognized in both Arizona common law and statutory authority, applies to every real estate contract and ensures that parties not only comply with the written terms of their agreements, but also act with honesty, fairness, and integrity throughout the transaction. While the disclosure requirements protect against omissions of known facts, the duty of good faith governs the conduct and intentions of the contracting parties themselves. The concept of good faith and fair dealing means that neither party may act in a way that prevents the other from receiving the benefits of the contract, even when the contract does not explicitly require cooperation or fairness. Arizona law implies these obligations into every agreement. This ensures that real estate contracts are not only legally binding, but also morally sound and equitable in execution. Under the Arizona Constitution, Article 2, Section 4, which protects due process and fairness, and through common law precedent, all contracts are interpreted to require fair performance and honest communication. The Arizona courts have repeatedly affirmed this duty as an inherent part of all contractual relationships. In Rawlings v. Apodaca, Arizona 1986, the Arizona Supreme Court clarified that every contract carries an implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing, which prohibits parties from intentionally depriving each other of the benefits of their agreement. This case, although involving an insurance contract, applies broadly to real estate because it establishes that a party who technically fulfills a contract but does so dishonestly or with ill intent violates this covenant. Similarly, in Wells Fargo Bank versus Arizona Laborers, Teamsters, and Cement Masons Local Number 395 Pension Trust Fund, Arizona 2002, the court reiterated that bad faith conduct can exist even when a party complies with the literal terms of a contract if they act in a manner that undermines the contract's spirit or purpose. In real estate, good faith and fair dealing appear in many forms: accurate communication, timely performance, cooperation during inspections, and honesty in negotiations. For example, a buyer who submits an offer intending to renegotiate after acceptance without a legitimate reason violates the principle of good faith. Likewise, a seller who accepts an offer but delays responding to repair requests or withholds necessary documents to frustrate closing would also be acting in bad faith. Even though both may argue they followed the contract's literal terms, their conduct undermines the agreed-upon purpose of fair exchange and performance. Arizona's real estate contracts explicitly reinforce this duty. The Arizona Association of Realtors, residential resale. Real estate purchase contract requires both the buyer and seller to exercise good faith and fair dealing in fulfilling their contractual obligations. This means meeting deadlines, providing requested information, responding to notices promptly, and not concealing material facts. For example, if a buyer fails to deliver earnest money by the required deadline, or a seller refuses to grant access for inspections, those actions may constitute a breach of good faith. Under ARS, paragraph 33, 801 et seq, and Commissioner's Rule, R4 281101A, brokers are also expected to uphold these same standards in their professional conduct, ensuring that all parties act fairly and honestly in the transaction. The duty of good faith also extends to the escrow and closing process. Escrow officers, brokers, and agents must ensure that funds and documents are handled accurately and in accordance with the party's intentions. If one party attempts to manipulate the process for personal gain, for instance, by altering agreed terms or withholding a document until the other party concedes to new demands, such conduct would be considered bad faith. Arizona courts have recognized that even the absence of overt fraud can still result in a violation of fair dealing if one party's actions cause undue delay, financial harm, or loss of contractual benefit. A practical example illustrates this principle. A buyer agrees to purchase a home contingent. Upon financing approval, while waiting for lender approval, the buyer continues to make reasonable efforts to secure a loan. This behavior exemplifies good faith. However, if the buyer secretly applies for financing knowing they are unqualified or misrepresents income to obtain approval, that conduct reflects bad faith. Likewise, a seller who agrees to make certain repairs before closing but cuts corners by hiring unlicensed labor or using inferior materials also breaches their duty of fair dealing, even if they technically completed the repairs. For brokers and licensees, acting in good faith is not only an ethical duty, but a legal one. Under Commissioner's Rule R4 and 28, 1101A, all licensees must deal fairly with all other parties and avoid misrepresentation or concealment of material facts. Failure to uphold this standard can result in disciplinary action under ARS, paragraph 32-2153. Furthermore, the National Association of Realtors, R, Code of Ethics mirrors this principle, requiring realtors, R, to treat all parties honestly and to avoid actions that might discredit the profession or mislead clients. Discussion. What does the duty of good faith and fair dealing require in a real estate contract? Answer. It requires that both parties act honestly and fairly, avoid deception, and cooperate so that each party receives the full benefit of the agreement as intended. Can a party breach the duty of good faith even if they comply with the written terms of a contract? Answer. Yes, if their actions or intentions undermine the contract's purpose, delay performance, or unfairly deprive the other party of the benefits of the deal, this still constitutes a breach of good faith. Why is the duty of good faith essential for brokers and agents in Arizona? Answer. Because Arizona law and the Commissioner's rules require licensees to promote fairness, honesty, and professionalism, ensuring that all parties to a transaction are treated equitably. Review summary. The duty of good faith and fair dealing is a cornerstone of Arizona contract law and is implied in every real estate agreement. It ensures that all parties act with honesty, fairness, and cooperation in both spirit and action, not merely in compliance with the contract's written terms. This obligation extends to buyers, sellers, brokers, and escrow officers alike, influencing every stage of a transaction from negotiation to closing. Arizona courts in Rawlings versus Apodaca and Wells Fargo Bank versus Arizona laborers reaffirm that conduct intended to hinder, delay, or deceive violates this covenant, even when contractual terms are technically met. By adhering to these principles, real estate professionals foster trust, reduce disputes, and uphold the integrity of Arizona's real estate market.